My name is Jocelyn Ramirez. I'm the chef and founder of plant-based food business here in Los Angeles called Vida Verde, and have been doing these online cooking classes all throughout our COVID quarantine. And it's been so cool to see people who are new to a lot of these recipes, or maybe have eaten these recipes made by other folks and have always felt like they're a little too scary to prepare at home. But I'm here to tell you that it's all doable. Once you make it at home, you're going to realize how easy it is. Maybe it just takes a little bit of time, but you're going to have delicious meals when, the more you learn about how to process all these recipes and ingredients that are so delicious to Mexico. So today we're going to be making our mole colorado, and I will say that mole colorado, it's a tongue twister for me sometimes, is one of many varieties of mole. We've mostly heard of mole poblano, which is from the state of Puebla in Mexico, which is known for its super like chocolatey rich, sweet and spicy, kind of foundation of that mole sauce. And the other thing I like to say too is that mole is sauce. That's literally what it means. It's a Nahuatl word for sauce, which is why, for example, guacamole is an avocado sauce. So mole means sauce. So if you say mole sauce, you're pretty much saying sauce, kind of like chai tea. That's pretty much saying tea. And so mole colorado is named that way because it does have a little bit of like this reddish hue to it. And it mostly comes from like the guajillo chiles and the tomatoes, and of course, like there's so many other ingredients in there that we'll talk about in just a moment. But I wanted to talk about the fact that there's like maybe I want to say there's over 10 at least varieties of Mexico that are, or varieties of mole that are eaten throughout Mexico, and some of them really range from region to region. But I will also say that some of them also range from family to family. So you may have, one family who prepares it a certain way, and then the family next door that prepares it a slightly different way. And everybody always claims that theirs is the best, right? So, so hopefully you enjoyed this recipe. The other thing that I like to mention when it comes to moles is it's also not to be confused with pipián, which is another regional sauce, mostly from areas like Zacatecas and sometimes in Jalisco. And that one is more of like a pepita base sauce. And so the pepitas are definitely like the foundation of that, and really like give it this like nice earthy nutty, like, well, not nutty because their pepitas are a seed, they're pumpkin seeds, but sometimes mole and pipián are used interchangeably when in fact they are quite different in their flavor profiles. So just FYI, just a little back notes on all these like different mole conversations, and I'll keep trying to weave through as much as I can think about throughout this class here. So let's get into the ingredients. I want to talk a little bit about the ones that we're going to be using today for our mole colorado. And I'm just going to pan down. You can see my cutting board here. I'm going to take a sip of water. So you can see that it calls for a variety of different ingredients. In fact, my cutting board was full, so I had peanuts underneath there. But the main ingredients for most moles tend to be the chiles. Here we're using guajillo and ancho chiles. So, and they're dried varieties of these chiles that you can find at your typical Mexican grocery stores. So guajillos are these long, narrow chiles, and they are pretty mild in spice. I would say that the smaller they are, the more of a kick that they have, but they're not super spicy. They're not as spicy as like a chile de árbol, for example. So they're a little bit on the milder side. And then you have your chile ancho, which is one of those green big pasilla peppers that you typically see for chiles rellenos that has been dried. And it's called ancho because it's wide. That's what ancho means. And this one I would say is definitely, for me at least, not spicy at all. It has a hint of like, you can taste the fact that it is a chile, but you can literally eat this as is and you're not going to feel like your mouth is burning. It doesn't have a whole lot of capsaicin, and I like to describe it as sort of like a slightly spicy raisin. So when it's dried, it has like a tiny bit of a sweet note to it. An ingredient that I have in the same bowl, but we're going to be using them during different times throughout the recipe, is just a tortilla. I have here a pre-made yellow corn tortilla made from a Los Angeles vendor here called Kernel of Truth Organics. And you can pick these up at your local health food store here in Los Angeles, such as Cookbook Market in Echo Park and Highland Park. You can also pick them up at Sarah's Market in City Terrace, as well as Grassroots Market in South Pasadena. Now, of course, if you don't have Kernel of Truth, you can definitely use any tortilla that you have on hand, or if you want to, make tortillas from masa harina that you might have handy, you can definitely do that too. This is going to be used as a little bit of like another like thickener and binder in our sauce. So that corn is going to help bring it together, and we're going to char this. So we'll do that in a second. And then another key ingredient here, I forgot to mention, we have 4 of each chile. So 4 guajillos and 4 of our chile ancho, and 1 6-inch tortilla, or approximately that size tortilla. If you're using a little bit of a smaller one, but they're hand pressed, it's likely that they're a little bit thicker. So you're probably looking at the same quantity or same amount of masa being used there. And then I have here a 1/2 cup of just brown sesame seeds. And I've had the question of like, should I get them whole, unwhole? Either option is totally fine. So whatever variety you're able to find, I think that the most readily available option tends to be the whole variety. So that's 1/2 cup of just yellow sesame seeds. If you had black sesame seeds on hand, like I have a lot of black sesame seeds, and I kind of thought like, should I try it with this right now? But I figured I'd stay true to like the brown. I know I said yellow earlier, but like the brown sesame seeds, and then maybe another time I can try the black sesame seeds. And I have here 3/4 of a cup of almonds, skin on. They're just whole almonds that are raw. So they haven't really been processed too much. And so those are gonna get toasted up really nicely. And then I have 1/2 cup of shelled peanuts here. And I shelled these myself this morning. That was definitely a meditative, like I'm gonna check off the box. Like I meditated this morning because it was quite a bit of work getting all those peanuts out of the shell. And then I have a 1/2 cup of raisins here. I'm using golden raisins. You can use whatever variety of raisins you have on hand. These for me, they are definitely sweet, but they also have a little bit of like tanginess that I like. And they happen to be what I had on hand this morning. So any variety of raisins. And then getting into other flavor profiles here, some of the spices, you definitely need a whole cinnamon stick. And for cinnamon, one thing to make note of is that there's a couple of varieties of cinnamon out there. We spoke about this in one of the previous classes. This is a Ceylon cinnamon stick, and then their other variety is cassia, I believe is what the term we ended up looking at or finding out online. And so the two differences are, I think for me, pretty substantial in the flavor profile. So this Ceylon cinnamon is predominantly used in Mexican cuisine, although I will say that cinnamon is not a traditional ingredient that is like native to Mexico, but it has definitely been incorporated into the cuisine. And I could really easily break the cinnamon stick or crack it and start to break it open. It's pretty brittle. And the flavor is, I don't want to say it's kind of spicy because I feel like the cassia one also does feel a little bit spicy. But the other variety of cinnamon, the cassia one, this is Ceylon, the cassia one, that one is more of like a apple pie, pumpkin pie type of flavor profile, whereas this one is more of like té de canela and like Mexican recipes specifically. So you can find this at most Mexican grocery stores. I find that sometimes when I go to just like a health food store, they tend to only have the other variety of cinnamon that's more like apple pie. So this is my preferred style of cinnamon or flavor of cinnamon. I also have here 2 allspice berries, which are these 2 little round dots in here. And those are going to provide a really nice kind of aromatic in our dish. And they're going to get toasted to kind of release all the oils. In fact, all of these are going to get toasted to release some of that oil. And then of course we have 2 cloves here. And I have a teaspoon of whole cumin seeds. I prefer whole cumin seeds than the ground in this particular recipe. If you do have ground cumin, it'll work just fine. But I think that the whole cumin seeds that are toasted and then ground fresh are so much more flavorful and potent. So I prefer using the whole cumin seeds. I also have a whole plantain here. One thing I will say about a plantain is that the more of the black color that you see here is more of the ripening that's happened. In fact, I have a good friend from Puerto Rico, and when we've cooked together, he puts them in a plastic bag because plantains are heavily used in Puerto Rico. So he puts them in a plastic bag in a dark place for days until the entire plantain is completely black. And they look like, oh, maybe they might have spoiled or something, but you open them up and they're just so sweet and delicious. So this is as far as I can get with finding, you know, a grocery store one. I have another one here, but I feel like it's a little bit more yellow. So the more ripe you can find them, the better. If they're green, you want to wait a little bit. They're going to be, they're not going to really have too much sugar. They're going to be just mostly starchy. And so this is going to be a nice sweet point, as well as another one of these like thickeners and binders in our mole sauce. I have half of a yellow onion that I just quartered. I have 4 garlic cloves, and this recipe calls for 1 large globe tomato. I didn't have 1 large one, but I have these 2 sort of like small, medium-sized ones that I'll be using. And then lastly here, I have a couple tablespoons of just raw cacao powder. So it's going to give us a little note of this like chocolatey notes in it. And then I have 2 tablespoons of just a raw cane sugar. So this is kind of in a nutshell all of our ingredients. I also do have 4 tablespoons of oil on standby. Most things will get dry toasted. I would say about like half of the ingredients get dry toasted, and then the rest will be pan fried in some oil. And then I do have on my stove 5 cups of vegetable broth. I just warmed it through because it's gonna make my life a little bit easier if the broth is warm. And I just use a store-bought broth, but if you want to use a homemade broth, I highly recommend using any veggie scraps you have on hand. Like if you were chopping up some celery and have the base of your celery, carrot tops, any, you know, mushroom bits, you can throw in a pot with some water, a little bit of seasoning, bay leaves, and get a nice stock out of it, or a vegetable broth, and you can definitely use that. So let's get into the cooking process here. I'm going to turn on my stove, and if you take a look at my stove, there should be a second camera you see here, and you'll see my pan and my pot. So the pot in the back is just the vegetable broth that I've been warming up. And let me go ahead and pin this one. Oh, I think it is pinned, right? Okay, cool. All right, so the one in the back is just the vegetable broth that's been warmed up. It was just on low heat during this time that we've been talking, or I have been talking a lot, sorry. And then the front one is just a stainless steel skillet that I warmed up to about, I just turned it on. So I want it to warm up to about like a medium low heat. It's already getting a little bit warm. And I'm just gonna dry toast my chiles. So I like to toast, and this is kind of a traditional process, to toast your ingredients individually, meaning like each type of ingredient on its own at a time, just because different ingredients have different cook times. And if you mix them all together, there's a chance that you'll burn something because, for example, sesame seeds are going to toast a whole lot faster than almonds, right? And so you want to take your time with this. And this is part of the reason that they say that mole takes so long, because you do have to give a lot of care and attention to each one of the individual ingredients. So I'm going to start with the chiles. I am going to put these chiles together because they do have, I know that they cook around the same amount of time. And what I'm going to look for here for these chiles is to get Just a little bit of blackening to happen, just a little bit of color to happen. I want to see a tiny bit of smokiness emerging. The other thing that I did for these chiles that I didn't mention is I removed the stems. I removed all the seeds, as many as I could out of the chiles, and then I gave them a good rinse because you always want to clean your chiles because you don't know how, where they've been. Sometimes they're a little dusty. They've been like on a floor somewhere where they were dried. So you just want to give them a good rinse. And the other thing to look out for chiles is if you can try to find chiles that have a little bit of like pliability, like I wouldn't say that they're super soft, but they're not crispy and crunchy. Because if they are crispy and crunchy, it means that they've probably been dried for a long time. And so when they have a little bit of that flexibility, it means that they're likely more of like a fresh chile. So these will probably take about a minute or so on each side to just warm through. I'm gonna start to feel the aromatics of the chile, just becoming like prominent. And so essentially you're kind of reactivating like the oils in the chile that are dormant right now and kind of saying like, wake up, I want you to be extra delicious in this dish. And you don't want to cook them to the point where the chiles have really blackened so much that they're kind of like burnt to a crisp. One time in our Todo Verde kitchen, I had a new staff member who was making a sauce that called for chiles. I think it might have been a pipián, and the whole kitchen, everybody was coughing because she, created kind of like a little smoke storm. And it was because the chiles were burnt. She burned the chiles and that released so much smoke. And when they burn to that extent, it makes everybody cough. And she was like, oh, I blackened the chiles. I was like, no, that's not, that's burnt. So you just want to get a little bit of blackening to occur. Here's an example here. So you just want to see a little bit of this blackening here. Hopefully you can see that pretty well. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right side of my camera. Okay, so yeah, just a little bit of this blackening that happens. But you don't want to go like too much further than that, because then you start to get into like some really bitter notes with the chiles. And then it just kind of overpowers in a way that you don't want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and flip these guajillos over. It's a little bit harder to see the color change in the ancho chiles. I do see a little bit of blistering here. And again, this is just a dry skillet. You could pan fry these, but the other ingredients call to be the nuts and the seeds call to be dry toasted. So you wanna, I like to just keep the pan dry for now. And then once we get into some of the other ingredients that really need to be pan fried, then I will pan fry those. So I can see here, again, a little bit of blistering that's happened. I can see a tiny little bit of blackening too. Sometimes it some of the ancho chiles will look a little bit like the searing is happening. That's mostly when I use oil in the pan. I'll see a little browning, like a little browning and a sear that will happen. So I'm just gonna give these like another like 30 seconds. Actually, these are good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove these guajillos from the heat. And I have just a bowl of warm water. So I heated some water up earlier. I have a bowl of warm water that I'm just gonna drop those into to start rehydrating. And I wanna rehydrate these for at least 10 minutes until they get nice and soft and pliable. So I'm just gonna set those aside. Let me just give my guajillos another little bit of time. I'm going to slightly lower my heat because the next ingredient that I'm going to put into the skillet are brown sesame seeds. And if the pan is too hot, I'm going to just like pop the seeds all over the place and make a mess. So I just lowered my heat. The pan's obviously still pretty hot. So while these are finishing up, it's going to be totally fine. And then I'll slowly turn the dial up as needed with the sesame seeds in here. So I think my anchos are good to go. Again, I see a little bit of that blistering, that blackening. If you smell them, they should feel nice and fragrant. You should also be able to smell a little bit of that toastiness, a little bit of that spiciness coming through, waking up that capsaicin. And I'm gonna go ahead and remove these chiles. and put them into my water. And if you put them in a bowl of water and they are, I can show you here this example. Like this is not fully submerged, right? You want to make sure that you really like push each one of the chiles into the water until they're completely submerged. And if they're floating and they don't want to get underneath the water, you could add a little bit more water, or you could add something like a bowl filled with more water on top of them, and that'll kind of help push them down. So I'm just going to get these chiles out of the way for now. We'll worry about these chiles towards the end of our recipe once we're starting to get everything into the blender. So I'll just set these aside. And again, I just want to make sure my pan is not overly hot. I lowered it all the way to low heat. And so you can just use your hand here as a gauge, not to touch the pan, but just to feel the heat above it. And hopefully it'll cool down enough where it'll toast my seeds and not burn them. And I'm just going to grab a spatula here so that I can cook my seeds. So I feel like this is a good kind of like medium heat. I'm going to grab my ½ cup of my sesame seeds. And if you are cooking along, one thing you could do right now, because you do kind of want to keep your eye on these brown sesame seeds since they're so small, is just have a bowl. I have another bowl just here. So as I cook and toast the different ingredients, I'm going to be adding them to a larger bowl. So just have another bowl handy. It could be a pot if you're kind of out of bowls or whatever, you know, it could be anything, even another skillet that you're just going to pile all the ingredients all together that have been processed or toasted already. So I'm going to just pour my seeds in. Great, that wasn't too hot at all. I've done this where I pour them in and then they just like pop everywhere and start burning immediately. So you definitely want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I'm going to turn up my heat slightly to like a medium low. And essentially what you want to do is you want to just toast these seeds. These will take about, sometimes they take like 5 minutes, sometimes a little bit less, depending on, again, like how hot your stove is. For any of these like seeds and nuts, one thing you do want to do is like, you do need to babysit this. You can't drop them in and walk away, because then you're going to have uneven seeds or uneven toastedness. So you need to essentially just be here, just keep moving things around. You just have to keep making sure that you're like redistributing the ones that have just been, you know, touching the heat source for these few seconds and moving them around. I'm actually going to get a wooden spoon for these. Yes, much better. So what I'm doing here is I'm already seeing some browning that's happening. I already had a couple different seeds mixed together, so the colors were a little bit off, because you know, we buy a lot of sesame seeds for Todo Verde, and I've been kind of pulling from our stash there. And I had some that were a little darker, some that were a little lighter, and I've just been kind of like, I don't know why they're mixed together, but whatever, it is what it is. So essentially what I'm looking for is no matter the color that I'm just seeing a little bit of toastiness on them. These are actually cooking pretty quickly. You can see here, I started to burn some, so I was missing a spot. So you want to make sure that you're kind of going around all the edges. If you do start to see that, you can kind of note like, all right, that's maybe my hot spot there. You can lower the heat slightly and just keep checking on them. These are almost just about done. I'm going to give them like another 30 seconds and remove them. So these only took me a couple minutes to toast. And the other thing that you're noticing is the smell. So you should sense that nice toasty scent from the browning sesame seeds, or the, you know, the toasting sesame seeds. It should smell nice and toasty. And these are going to be a really, really great ingredient in our mole. These are going to also be, you know, what helps to thicken it. Another delicious ingredient, another kind of note in the background that you're going to taste in the mole sauce. I teach, or I have taught a quick mole version of this recipe. I would say that it's definitely not as delicious as this, but it's still really good. And, you know, and it's much faster. You know, so for example, instead of toasting all these sesame seeds, we add tahini, which is a sesame seed paste. So like there are little shortcuts that you could do, but I will say that nothing is ever gonna get to the point of like this true kind of mole sauce, you know, of like toasting each one of the ingredients fresh, and you know, really taking the time and attention to like care about each ingredient and its cooking process. That is what makes the mole sauce so delicious. So you can see here, hopefully you can see through the camera here, the difference in the color of these seeds compared to how we started. So it is much toastier. And I'm gonna go ahead and drop these into the bowl that I have here, just set aside to catch all the ingredients that I'm gonna be prepping today. All right, so sesame seeds are done. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my almonds. So I have, again, 3/4 of a cup of almonds. If you have, you know, almond slivers or blanched almonds, that works fine too. They don't have to be, you know, these almonds with the skin on if that's not what you have available. But I always wonder, like, what happens to the skins that they took off on those blanched ones? Like, it tastes perfectly fine, so I'd rather just buy these with very little processing. For the one of the cheese classes that I have, I do call for those like blanched, usually they're found slivered for that recipe, because the skins will make the cheese a little bit brown. And so if you want it to look more like that, you know, white cheesy color texture, then we do remove the skin. You know, you could soak these and remove the skin for that cheese recipe, or you can just buy them, you know, blanched without the skin. But for this recipe, I think it's another element that we should include. This is likely how folks have made it for a long time, without removing the skin. And so again, all I'm doing here is just essentially moving things around. I'm babysitting it. I want to see some of the toasting that happens. And I also, you know, will start to smell again, like some of the notes of those toasted almonds. A question that I have gotten in these mole classes is, can we throw everything in the oven? And that's always a great question. I'm pretty sure you're wondering that right now. And and you know, you could throw some of these ingredients in the oven, but I think that this way for me feels so much better, because you're looking at each one of these almonds and you're seeing like, okay, these are cooking a little bit too much, let me mix this over here. And there's so much more attention to detail, where in the oven, you know, sometimes again you have like hot spots and cooler areas of your oven, and things don't toast as evenly. And also, this is the way that folks in our communities have made mole for a long time, you know? So it's kind of keeping some of the tradition alive of like toasting each one of the ingredients. And typically this is done in you know, a clay comal, you know, over an open flame is where these ingredients might get toasted. Obviously, I'm using a high-tech Vitamix blender today, so to blend my mole down to a paste. And so I'm not keeping all the traditions true and alive. The way that you would traditionally make this in Mexico is you would grind each one of these ingredients into a paste on a metate, which is different than a mortar and pestle. It's not a molcajete. Metate is more of like this flat surface, and the stone that is used to grind it is more of like a rolling pin almost. And so that's how these ingredients are then ground. So I can see here that my almonds are starting to get a little of the blackening, the little toastiness on the sides, right in the middle. I'm just gonna give these another minute or so. Again, this is like on medium heat. And then I will go ahead and add these to the bowl. I wanna make sure that I get them warmed all the way through. So not just on the outside, but that I give them a little bit of time to really work through to the middle. And so again, me mixing here is just making sure that nothing is gonna burn, that I can adjust my temperature as needed. Like I keep kind of lowering the flame ever so slightly and then bringing it up. So right now I'm like lowering slightly. So I'm just keeping an eye on it. I'm completely in charge of what's happening here. I'm in control, I should say, of what's happening here. I can see some of that oil being released from the almonds. They look kind of like, I wouldn't say they look damp, but you can see a little bit of that glistening of the oil. At this point, I think this looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and add these almonds to my bowl. And let me lift this up so you can see a bit closer. You can see my almonds here, nice and toasty. You can hear them crackling too. So I'll go ahead and add those to the bowl. And then next up is my peanuts. So I have half a cup of peanuts here that I shelled this morning. And same thing here. I am going to just keep working these until I see kind of a similar browning that I saw in the almonds. Actually, maybe more like the sesame seeds. These are similar in the color of the sesame seeds. So any questions so far, especially for folks who are cooking along? Ooh, these are already getting brown. Let me lower my heat just ever so slightly.
I have a question about substitutions, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing our best over here, and we um we don't have a plantain, but we have a banana and we have plantain chips.
Ooh,
So I don't know
that's a,
which one would work better.
that's a great question. So for you said you have plantain chips as an alternative, as another option. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't add a banana because
Yeah.
I mean you could, but banana is just definitely a different texture and it's much sweeter too. The plantain chips, if you do add those, I would say that perhaps you can kind of use them in place of the tortilla because they're dried, you
Okay.
know. So
Yeah.
maybe like leave out the tortilla, and you could definitely try that. I have made this recipe without the plantain, and it still comes out pretty good. It's just missing a little bit of that complexity that the plantain provides, a little bit of that sweet note, a little bit of that starchiness. But if you add it with the plantain chips, you can just blend those towards the end when we get all the ingredients worked up in the blender. Any other questions so far? Anybody else who's missing any of the ingredients or had trouble finding any of the ingredients?
I couldn't find allspice today.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, sometimes it's a little tricky to find, especially as like the whole rounds of allspice. Um, yeah, there's certain ingredients that for me, I just kind of like will make sure that I always have it on hand. So, especially right now during COVID times, I've been buying more things online than I would like, but it's kind of hard to go to like, 4 or 5 stores looking for something in the way that I used to do it. Um, but there are a couple of like Mexican spice and chile spots that I like to hit up, and they typically do have some of these spices on hand, but it's like very specific, like it's in East LA. It's like, kind of like a almost like a swap meet. And so it's like not the easiest place to find. In fact, I sent a friend there to look for an ingredient, and she had to call me while she was there. She's like, I have no idea where I am. I'm lost. It's a maze. It's a maze there, seriously. But yeah, if maybe you have a brand that you like one online vendor that I really like is Thrive Market. And they're membership based, but the membership is really affordable. And they're essentially like a Whole Foods of dry goods online. And you can, get a box of like random ingredients that maybe you don't need like right this second, but at some point you will need. I just like to have a lot of things like stocked up on hand so I don't have to like run to the store to get a bunch of things each time. Um, so like for this, for today, all I had to do was go get a plantain, and then I just went and got like other groceries. But yeah, Thrive Market is one that I really like. And if you have the cookbook, which I didn't mention earlier, I'm going to remove my peanuts right now so you can check those out. They're nice and brown. I probably could give these another minute or so, but I want to keep it going since you know, I want to make sure we end on time here. So I have my seeds and my nuts essentially ready to go. I'm going to lower my heat just to make sure it's not too hot, because I'm going to toast my spices, and the spices are pretty delicate. So I'm going to give that just like a minute or two to cool down slightly. Of course, you could use another pan if you wanted to, but who loves to wash several pans? So I'm just going to be patient and wait a couple minutes before I start toasting my my allspice, my cloves, my cumin seeds. The cumin seeds could burn pretty easily, so I don't want to burn those. But one thing that I didn't mention earlier is my book, La Vida Verde, which you likely maybe have seen on our website where you signed up for this class. And the recipe that we are making out of La Vida Verde today is our mole, which is on page 57 if you do have the book available. I always encourage people to just jot down notes if there's like any additional info. Like in these classes, I'm definitely giving a lot more information than any pages of this book could provide, because, you know, I only have like, for most recipes, like a page, and my editor was constantly like, less words, less, can you consolidate this? And it's like, well, these are all kind of tips that I think are important, but of course, like you can only write so much in a cookbook. But in the back of the book, there is a section called ingredient sources. And I've listed here some of the online vendors that I really like to work with and use. And they, under each vendor, Thrive Market is listed here. It also lists some of the ingredients that you could purchase that are ingredients throughout the recipes in the book at these particular online shops. So you can check that out. If you don't have the book, we also listed this similar list in the online classes page towards the bottom of the page, because we didn't want this to be you know, only exclusive to the book. Like if you're taking these classes, you can definitely still find these online vendors on the shop page. I think I just listed it as kind of like special ingredients and where you can buy them, but I'm pretty sure I listed most of the vendors there on the site. Okay, so I think that my pan has cooled down enough. I had left it on low heat. So I am going to add the cinnamon stick. The cinnamon stick is going to take a little bit longer. So I'm going to add that there and give that a little bit of time. And then I am going to, even though I said not to do this, but I am going to add the allspice and the clove and just keep an eye on it. Like, look at how teeny tiny they are, you know? So I'm going to be able to like really take care of this. I'm going to wait for the cumin. The cumin's going to cook really quickly. So I'll do the cumin after I finish with these elements. You still want to babysit these. I have at the Todo Verde kitchen many times have burned allspice. Like literally I'll keep trying to cook like 10 of these allspice berries, and I'll walk away thinking like I have like 10 seconds to grab something else or do something else or put some dirty dishes from our station in the dish pit, and then somebody starts talking to me and then I go back and they're burned. So, you know, they cook pretty quickly. Right now I had it on low heat. I'm turning it slowly back up to like a medium heat. And I could already see, I just saw a tiny bit of like little like vapor smoking. So I just want to keep an eye on these. You can use your hands if you need to. Ooh, I just saw a little bit of smoking from the clove too. So I just want to be able to really smell these ingredients is what, so this is where you have to use that sense of smell, because it's not always like something you see, especially with something, for example, like cloves. You're not going to see a whole lot of difference in the cloves. Like you're putting them in one way, they're going to come out looking almost exactly the same, but you're using your sense of smell here to kind of feel the aromatics kind of wake up. And this is a really great technique at home. Like if you like to use like fresh black pepper that you grind every time you use it freshly, when you buy those peppercorns, you can definitely take a little bit of time to toast them and then let them cool and add them to your pepper grinder. And so every time you have pepper that you use, it's like going to be even more potent because you took the time to like really wake up those flavors. All right. And I guess it's kind of the equivalent of like, you can eat, you know, you can eat like toast without toasting the bread, or you can toast the bread and it's going to be so much better. So it's kind of that same idea, you know? Okay, let's see. I'm getting a little bit of this browning that's happening with the cinnamon stick. Check out that cinnamon stick is like blooming, blossoming, because it's like, OMG, it's hot in here. So that is definitely, I can see it like literally moving and breaking open. So I'm just gonna give these like another couple seconds. I think I might actually move. Let me smell my cloves. Yeah, so I can smell my cloves. I wish I can, this was like a smell TV and you can smell that. But I can definitely smell the powerful scent of the cloves. Let me check out my allspice berries here. Yeah, same thing. So the clove I would say is like more sharp of a scent and a flavor. And the allspice berries are like more mellow and grounding, but so equally delicious. And they do smell different. You know, they do taste different. So you want to make sure to include both of those ingredients if you do have them on hand. I'm going to remove these like little bits of cinnamon because these are for sure cooking a whole lot faster. So those are already browned. I'm going to give these just another like 30 seconds. I can see some of the browning that's happening, especially on like the tips here of the cinnamon stick. And it's literally breaking apart on its own from the heat. And then I'm going to lower my heat again, actually, as I'm waiting these last 30 seconds, because I don't want to get the pan too hot and burn my cumin seeds. So I'm going to just kind of adjust here for the next ingredient. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove my cinnamon stick. I'll throw that in the same bowl, making sure I don't have any other bits in here. And then let's go ahead and add these cumin seeds. It's 1 teaspoon. This is gonna cook really fast. If you're using ground cumin, you wanna make sure that it really is not super hot, because it will literally like burn and start smoking immediately. So you can maybe see that I'm getting a little bit of smoking here, and I can hear the crackling of the seeds that are toasting. I can see the browning that's happening. I'm just gonna give these like another 5 to 10 seconds and I will go ahead and remove them. So this is really quick. I can definitely smell the cumin, and I have this all the way on low heat right now. So this pan that I have, it like adjusts, it gets hot really quickly and it cools down fairly quickly. So just adjusting here as needed. I'll go ahead and remove these cumin seeds. They've definitely browned in that short period of time. That was probably like just a little under a minute. I can see the difference in my cumin seeds in the color here. So I'll go ahead and toss those into the same bowl. Everything's going into the same bowl. And now here is where we introduce our oil. So I am going to add, I have again 4 tablespoons of oil. I like to use grapeseed oil for cooking here at home, but the type of oil that you prefer for cooking at home will work fine. I don't typically like to use extra virgin olive oil for cooking. For me, that's more of like a finishing oil rather than one that I use to cook, because it doesn't have as high of a smoke point, so it can burn pretty easily and start smoking pretty easily. So grapeseed is oil, excuse me, is awesome. Grapeseed is oil. You can use grapeseed, you can use avocado oil, you can use regular olive oil versus like the extra virgin. So I'm tossing in my 1/2 cup of raisins. And so you can see here that the raisins look kind of, you know, like dried and like, what's the word in English? Like chupados, like sunken in, right? And then just from pan frying for this little bit of time that they're going to be in here, they are going to get a little bit plump, and some of them will almost look like they want to burst. So, and they're also going to slightly change their shade and color. And so I'm going to give this just a little bit more time so you can see how they transform. Most raisins will do this. They'll get nice and plump. They'll definitely get a little bit brown. Let me turn up my heat just slightly. And I always wonder, like, what if one does burst? That's not going to be fun. It's almost like you know, when little cherry tomatoes burst as you're cooking, and I've had one like pop on my arm as I'm cooking. I'm like, oh, good times, you know? Okay. So just maybe another like 30 seconds on these. You can hopefully see that transformation. I'm gonna pull one up so you can see, like check this one out. It's like a whole little round raisin now that's like kind of plump and browned. Here you can see this one here is nice and plump and round. So they are slightly absorbing a little bit of that oil. They're getting also plump because of that heat source. So there's a little bit of a steam happening in there too. Okay. Check that one out. I'm gonna set it aside so you could see. That one's like a little balloon.
Sorry,
So,
how much oil was that supposed to be out of the?
so I probably added like about a tablespoon or so of oil right now.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, sorry for not clarifying that. So yeah, I just added a little drizzle, like a tablespoon or so. And then I didn't want to add it all now because I'm definitely gonna need probably the majority of it for cooking the plantains. And I kind of like add a little bit as needed as I go along. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove my raisins. You can see that they've gone from looking like raisins to maybe like the tiniest little potatoes or something right now with this golden color. So these are pretty good to go for me, and I'll remove those and add those to my bowl. All right. Okay, and I'm going to just prep my my plantain because this is going to take quite a while to cook. I mean, this is pretty easy. I'm just going to break it down. It's essentially just cutting off the top and bottom and then creating a slice lengthwise down the plantain. If you ever wanted to make some plantain boats, you can do the same exact thing. You can even keep the tips on to hold it together. And if you just slice there and throw it on a grill in your backyard, like if you're ever grilling, it will take a while to cook. They'll get really black and then they'll start to like pop open here where the incision is. And then you can like stuff them with something. So imagine kind of like a stuffed potato, but it's a plantain instead. So you're still gonna get that nice like starchiness. I've done that a few times with my friend Manolo, and we did like some jackfruit filling with like a cashew cream and stuff like that. So it always ends up being super delicious. And then all you need to do, like once you get that plantain out of there, it's going to be harder to get it out of there when if it's underripe, right? So if it's still really green, it's going to be really hard to get it out of the skin. And you just want to create some slices. So I'm going to cut them kind of thin because I don't want to take too much time cooking these. And so, but you know, kind of depends on like how thick you want to go ahead and slice them. I've done them in like larger chunks and that works fine too. It just takes a little bit longer for the center to get cooked through, and just in the effort of time, I'm not going to cook them too thickly or cut them too thick so that they can cook pretty quickly. All right, put that one in half there. And then I'm going to go ahead and come back to my skillet here. And I still feel it's like I left it on low heat. I'm going to add a little bit more of that oil. So again, I had that 4 tablespoons and I'm just kind of adding as I go as needed. So I'm just going to add maybe another like tablespoon or so. I'll likely need more for the plantains. I'm going to spread it out. Once you see that your oil is glistening and it's moving really quickly through the pan, it's hot. So I'm going to go ahead and start layering in my slices of plantains. You can hear that sizzling. I'll grab my tongs to help me turn them over. And this plantain is pretty, it's not all the way ripe, but I would say it's like maybe like 80% of the way there. So it definitely feels like even the way that the texture of it feels like kind of slimy and like gooey. For me, that indicates sugars. It's a little bit sweet and ripe. It was also like pretty easy to cut and take out of the skin of the plantain. So this is going to be really nice in this dish. And all I'm looking for is a little bit of browning to occur, and I want to make sure that the plantains get nice and soft. So I didn't see who asked the question. I think it was Steph using the plantain chips. The only thing you might note is that you might need to add a little bit more of the broth, or one thing I will say is, like, if you need more broth in general, like if you need a little bit more liquid to as you're cooking your mole, you could also use the water you're rehydrating your chiles in to create a little bit more of that liquid that you need. But if you're using the dried plantain chips, you might need just a touch more of that liquid, because that's going to kind of like absorb some of the vegetable broth that you're using in the recipe, which is the 5 cups that it calls for. So just take note of that if yours looks a little bit like it's drying out, it's all good. You just need to add more liquid. All right, I'm going to grab my tongs here. I'm pretty sure I started right here somewhere. Let's see how I'm doing. So you can see here in that short time, I already got a little bit of browning here on this one. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to keep going and flipping these over. Okay. And these are actually going to cook. Ooh, it smells so good. It smells so good. I mean, if you love plátano frito, yeah, I got the second plantain because I was like, oh, because I'm not sure which one will be riper by the time I need it for this class. But I was also like, but I can just make plátano frito afterwards. So just another little treat there. I feel that my pan is like needing a bit more oil. Maybe not actually. This actually looks okay. It looks a little dry here on this side compared to there. So I'll just move some of this down. And this is something that if you were trying to keep your oil consumption pretty light, you could also throw the plantain in the oven, similar to what I was just mentioning. Like, you know, you could score it and you could put it in the oven like at 350. I don't know the exact time it would take. I'm assuming that it might take somewhere around like 30 to 45 minutes or so, kind of like a baked potato. And you can cook it until it gets nice and soft, and you know it's cooked through. And you could add that to the mole, just if you're trying to do a little bit less of the oil. Just another idea. But obviously, like lightly pan frying the plantains is always super delicious too. Another tip for folks who are trying to like be cautious of their oil consumption is if you buy oil, or not if you buy oil in like those spray bottles, like kind of the aerosol spray, like you don't have to buy those. You could buy an aerosol container, like a reusable one, and put oil in it. And like, I think you might need to like pump air in it or something like that. And then you can spray the oil. So if you spray, you can like evenly coat, you know, the plantains, and you can maybe do that in a bowl or something, or on the cutting board, and then pop them into the hot pan, and that could definitely work too. So you can see here, this one has browned on both sides. I'm like checking the texture here. You can see that it's like nice and squishy. You can give one a taste if you want. And I'm going to go ahead and start removing some of these and adding them to my bowl. So this cooked pretty quickly because I sliced them so thin. And note that like this one, for example, is like a thicker chunk, and it's going to take a little longer to cook. So you can see like it's a little bit more yellow here, like a cooked yellow, and then it looks a bit more raw towards the center. So the thicker they are, a little bit more time it'll cook. And I'm going to take these out quick because I'm starting to see a little bit too much of I'm starting to get a little bit of burning happening here. Too much talking, not enough moving ingredients around. All right. Let me lower my heat slightly. There we go. And I'm okay with some of that blackening, but like once it gets like too much further than that, you're gonna start getting into like really burnt pieces. So go ahead and start moving out most of these. Yeah, these are all mostly done except for these larger chunks. They need a little bit more time. Okay. And then the last couple things that I'm gonna add to this pan, oh, one plantain overboard, is I'm going to add my tomatoes. I'm gonna turn up my heat for this a little bit. So I have just whole tomatoes. You could definitely, you know, cut them if you wanted to. I like to leave them whole because I'm trying to keep as much of the juice that's in the tomatoes in them. And when you know, quarter them, you're gonna have some of that evaporating right away. So I wanna try to keep as much of that as possible. And then I have my, my onion here that's been quartered. It's a half of an onion, excuse me. And one thing I will say about the tomatoes is that I mentioned this earlier, but just in case you missed that, is that it's supposed to be one large globe tomato, but because I didn't have one large one, I'm just using two sort of like medium small ones instead. And then I'm gonna add my 4 garlic cloves. These are gonna cook a whole lot faster than everything else. So I gotta keep an eye on those garlic cloves. And I'm just gonna add just a touch more oil. I'm not gonna end up using the 4 whole tablespoons actually, which is great. So not too much oil that I'm using today. You can just reserve that for once we put the mole in the pot. We can definitely use it there, or you can just omit the rest of it and just set it aside for something later. But you could add it to the pot that we're gonna use for the mole. And as the mole is kind of going from the blender to the pot, it'll kind of pan sear that sauce a little bit. So I'm just gonna grab my tongs wherever they are. Here they are. I'm gonna grab that plantain that went overboard. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring my mole pot in. Let me check these garlic cloves actually. So another reason why things are kind of blackening too is because at this point there is just some like residue from the other ingredients on the pan as well too, which is fine. I think the layering of that flavor is going to be good. And once your onion starts to get a little bit soft, if you do want to separate the individual, you know, segments of the onion or the layers of the onion, you can definitely do that if you want to. It'll help kind of speed the process along, and then each one of them will start to get even more caramelized. I just realized that I'm like panning down to my socks and my flip-flops on the other camera. So let me just pan up right here. Okay. All right, so just cooking these until you see that, like for the onion, for example, I want a little bit of like softening to occur. Like right now, they're still pretty, you know, solid pieces. The smaller pieces are starting to get a little bit soft. So I don't want them to get soft like caramelized onions, but I want them to just get a little bit soft. Let me check on these plantain pieces. I'm gonna go ahead and take those out. I'm gonna check on the tomato. So I can see a little bit of browning that's happening there on the tomato. I'm gonna keep it still flipped on that first side before I flip it over. I want it to get just a little bit more color on it. And then I'm going to just remove my hot vegetable broth from this back burner for a moment. And I'm gonna just turn on that back flame. And just to kind of keep us on track with timing here, I'm going to just put my tortilla over the open flame. And essentially what I want to do is I want this tortilla to get kind of crunchy, crispy, overcooked, almost like a tostada that has been grilled versus one that has been fried. So I'll get a little bit of blackening that'll happen. I'm gonna keep my eye on it as I check on these other ingredients here. Let's see how the tortilla is doing. I'm going to flip it over to the second side so you can see a little bit of blackening that happens. I'll likely turn it back over again onto that first side, but just kind of moving it back and forth so it has time to cook on both sides pretty good. And then I'm going to, I think I'm going to go ahead and remove my garlic cloves here. These are nice and getting a little soft and browning. So I'll go ahead and take those out and throw them in the bowl, the catch-all bowl of all the ingredients that are ready to go. Let's check on this tortilla. Ooh, nice. So if you see that blackening that happened on the tortilla, you're looking for something like that. I'm looking for a little bit of like crunchy crispiness to happen. Let me lower the heat here on the tortilla so that it focuses more in the center. I just put this over the flame on my stove. You could cook it on a comal if you wanted to, or place it in the oven, but the oven might be too much work for just one little tortilla, you know? I'm gonna remove these smaller pieces of onion that are nice and soft now and give the larger pieces just a little bit more time. Let me flip over my tomatoes. So I can feel that my tomato is getting a little bit squishy. I'm looking for that squishiness, for that almost like cooked throughness. Obviously, these are gonna cook in the mole, so they don't need to be cooked all the way through right now. But I like a little bit of that layering of flavor in the mole sauce. So I'm gonna give my tortilla just another like 30 seconds to get even more crispy, crunchy, and then I'll remove that from the heat. Any other questions so far? And right now, the last ingredients that we have standing here are, ooh, my tortilla's on fire. Check that out. All right, my tortilla is good to go. So I have a nice blackened, see how it, like, it's just standing on its own. It's like a tostada. It's nice and crispy. So I'm going to add that to my bowl. I'm gonna add all these onion layers into my bowl. And then I just have my tomatoes left. And the last ingredients that I was saying that are left standing are my cacao powder, my raw cacao powder, and my sugar. So those are just going to get blended directly into the blender, which I'm going to start processing right now. Before I do that, I'm just going to add a pot to my stove here. I'm going to push this skillet back and bring a pot here. So that'll keep going just a little bit longer. And then I have here my pot. I am gonna pan fry my mole, so I'm gonna add the remaining of my oil here to the pot. And I'm gonna put this on like a medium low, like halfway between medium, halfway between low, just to let it warm through. This is like a nice stainless steel pot, so it has a thick bottom. So I just wanna make sure that the oil has a little bit of time to get hot. And then I'm going to start working in all my ingredients. So let's come back to my cutting board here. And I'm gonna use my Vitamix, which I mentioned earlier, and I'm gonna need to blend this in a couple batches. You will likely need to do the same. If you don't have a Vitamix and your blender struggles to blend the mixture up, you could use a fine mesh strainer to just strain your mole before adding it to the pot, just to catch any bits of chile or anything that's not gonna blend up. And let's take a quick look at all the things. I'm like, it's not just like one thing, it's like all the things. So I have my 5 cups of my warm through vegetable broth, and then I have my bowl of all the things, the tortilla, the plantain, the raisins, just this alone like is picture worthy. I kind of do want to take a picture before throwing it all in the thing, but my phone is using using on Zoom. But you can check that out. It's so beautiful. And so I'm going to be adding these ingredients, and it's not going to be perfect. I can't say like add exactly half of each thing to the first batch and half of the other. So It's not about tasting right now. All it's about is like, what I look for is a balance of kind of like more moist ingredients to dry ingredients. So, you know, I could rip the tortilla in half and kind of add some of the nuts, some of the onion, for example, and just kind of try to balance it so that I know, like, okay, I'm not adding like all the nuts and all the seeds in one shot, because that's going to be so much drier than, like, you know, mixing in a few of the plantains and the onion and the tomato and trying to like get it a little bit smoother that way. So let me add another big kind of tongue full of this stuff. And so one is going to probably taste slightly different, like one of your blenders. What was I saying? Like I'm trying to think of the word, like just breaking it up into like two different blender cups. Not two different blender cups, the same blender cup. I don't know why I'm getting like tongue twisted here, but just making sure that you have like a nice ratio. I'm going to go ahead and grab my tomato that is still over there making a bunch of noise. And so it's like nice and soft, slightly blackened tomato. I'll throw that in there. I'm going to throw some of my sugar, some of my cacao in there. Notice I haven't added any salt yet. So that is going to be something that I do once all of the mole is in the pot. I'll go ahead and season it. I have my warm vegetable broth here. I kept the measuring cup. I could probably, it's a little full. Let me just not make a mess and do this instead. So I'll add a couple cups. I'll add one more. So it's 5 cups, so like about 2.5 cups worth, half of it into this pot. Just warmed it through. It's going to help to rehydrate the ingredients a little bit faster. And then I'm going to take this over to my Vitamix station or base right back here. And I'll go ahead and blend that until it's smooth. And this is going to take a few minutes. So I forgot the chiles. How about that? Let's talk about chiles real quick. I was like, why is this so pale? It's not red. Duh, we did a whole chile thing and I set them too far aside. I almost forgot about them. Okay, so let's add the chiles real quick. And I'm gonna add, you can see how pliable and soft that they are now that they've been rehydrating. Like, check out this chile ancho is like ripping apart. It's so soft. So I'll add a couple of each of those chiles. Let me just add these. And then this liquid that I was telling you about, the rehydrating liquid, if you end up needing more liquid in your mole, you can absolutely use that liquid to help blend it up. So this should look a little bit more red now in the way that it's supposed to. Wow, my blender already sounds like it's getting tired, but you can see that that's quite a bit of blending. And I feel like I kind of want to blend it just a touch more. You can see here that I have this nice mole texture. I think that it still feels a little bit too chunky for me. So I'm going to add just a touch more liquid, but you definitely want to get like this thick sauce that like sticks to the back of a spoon. If I taste it right now, I'm not really going to get the true sense, even though, wow, that tastes really good. It's not the true sense of like what the mole end result is going to be, because of course, like it doesn't have all the ingredients mixed in yet. So the ratios are slightly off and it's not salted yet. So I'm just going to add just a little bit more of this vegetable broth. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it just one more blend in the blender. And I'm not afraid to add too much liquid. Like I feel like I could add the 5 cups and potentially like some of the rehydrating liquid, because the longer you cook it, it's going to continue to reduce, right? And so even if it feels a little bit too loose at the beginning, as it reduces, it'll get to this really nice consistency. So just give us another minute or so. All right, so let's check out this consistency. So a little bit smoother. You can see how much smoother that is just with that additional liquid. It's kind of like this like brownish, reddish, like brick color. And then I have my oil that's been heating up here in the pan. So I might, in Spanish we say salpicar, like kind of splash a little bit, hopefully not too much. And then I'll go ahead and drop some of this mole, or all of this mole. Ooh. Yeah, it is definitely splashing around. So my clothes are having a good time right now. Make sure you're wearing an apron. Ooh. Let me lower that heat. It is definitely splashing around. Okay. So I'm going to get that second blender going to blend up that second batch. Let me go ahead and use my wooden spoon here to kind of mix that up. There we go. And it's going to keep bubbling. So let me go ahead and get that second batch going. Let me get the lid out of the way here. I have my bowl of all the things. Again, I'm just going to drop everything else in here, the tortilla, the rest of the seeds, the plantains. I'm going to use my spatula to scrape everything out. Let me get that. So I'm just going to scrape every little last seed, every little last everything that we took so much time and effort to cook perfectly. Get that all into the blender. And then I try to avoid as much as possible with the second batch, like getting the seeds stuck to the top on, of the blender, or pushing them down, because then they don't blend if they're not super close to the blade. So keep an eye out for that. Let me get rid of the bowl. And I'm also going to scrape down my tongs. I'm not kidding when I'm saying like get all of it, nothing left behind. You worked so hard on all these ingredients, so you want to get everything into the blender and make sure that it's a part of the dish. And then I will add the rest of the vegetable broth, the chiles, and the tomato, and we will get blending on this. So I'm just going to take one quick look to make sure all those seeds are down into the blender. I mean, you could use this, well, maybe you don't have a second blender cup. I have a few. So maybe that's not normal for most households, but yeah, I have a couple of more clean Vitamix containers.
Hey Jocelyn, can you confirm what is going into the blender? Is it a little bit of everything?
Yeah. So earlier, what I was saying is like make sure it's like a nice ratio of your wet ingredients to your dry ingredients. So like it was the first batch was like some of the onion, some of the some of the tomato, like some of the seeds, some of the nuts, so that it's not all like only nuts and seeds in one, and then only all the wet stuff, because obviously the wet stuff's going to blend really easily. So you kind of want to try to balance it, although it's like not precise, so that you can make your life easier in the blender. All right, I'm gonna drop in that tomato. Oh, and I still need these tongs for my chiles. All right, I got all the last bits of my chiles here. I'm gonna keep this rehydrating liquid just in case I need it, and it'll stay with me throughout the process of it cooking. I dropped in the rest of my cacao and my sugar, and I'm gonna drop in the rest of my vegetable broth. And I will blend that until it's nice and smooth. All right, so I am gonna add just a little touch more of my rehydrating liquid. I feel like it's, yeah, I can see that chunkiness, right? So check that out. So it's not getting quite smooth. I can give it more time in the blender, but I know if I put a little bit more liquid in here, it's going to smooth it out a whole lot more quickly than just putting it in the blender too much longer. So I'll just drop in maybe about, I'll do like 3/4 of a cup to a cup of that rehydrating liquid, and I'll keep blending it up in the blender. And then I'm just keeping an eye on the mole that's on in the pot. Right now it's just open, so there is a little bit of like bubbling that's happening. So I'm just mixing it every now and then to make sure that the bottom doesn't burn or anything like that. All right, so let's take a look. Obviously you see me using this tamper a whole lot. If you don't have a Vitamix and don't have this tamper, you have a regular blender at home. Look at how much smoother that is since I added that additional liquid. So this is ready to go. You could use a spatula, a silicone or rubber spatula, and you can turn off the blender, take off the lid, scrape down the sides, mix it up, make sure you're kind of redistributing everything, and then turn your blender back on. And you'll likely need to use that fine mesh strainer to just catch any of the bits that didn't quite blend up. And I'm going to go ahead and just use my, let me make sure there's like no seeds on here. Let me give that a quick rinse in my chili water. If I do end up using this rehydrating liquid, there are some like floating seeds in here. So I'll likely pass it through a strainer if I do add it, because I just want to get this nice smooth mole sauce. I just said sauce. Okay, so I'm just going to just scrape my whole blender down, get all of that mole into the pot. And then what you want to do is salt it liberally to your desired salt point. And you want to just let it cook for at least an hour to allow the flavors to meld together. And it really start to allow, you know, everything to continue to like wake up and become like this nice singing harmony of ingredients together. And you could, you know, make this in a dish like enmoladas as it's featured in the book. You could simply, you know, cook some Mexican brown rice, for example, and just grill up some mushrooms and add it over the mushrooms, or whatever it is that you'd like to eat it. You know, I've done everything from like pan sear slices of tofu, like extra firm tofu that's just seared in a little bit of oil, salt, and pepper, and then I just sometimes I put, if the tofu ends up looking really nice, then I'll put the mole on the bottom of the plate, and I'll put the nice pieces of seared tofu on top so that you can see how beautifully they came out. If they don't come out so great, then they're on the bottom and they're covered in mole. So it really depends. As you can see, I'm like scraping every little last bit of the mole into the pot. Sometimes I get into like full-on señora vibes and I put a little bit of water in here and I just give it, and it's just a little bit of water, but enough to kind of like swish around and get all of that into the pot. I don't want to lose any of that mole. So much hard work. Why would we want to lose any of it? So this is probably about, I would say maybe like 2 quarts, a little bit less than 2 quarts of mole. And it'll feed anywhere from like 6 to 10 people out. And I made it that way. It might feed more, but I'm assuming people might get seconds. And like with Mexican families, you never want to be like, wow, that wasn't enough food, you know? This freezes really well. You can definitely pop it in the freezer in a food safe container, freezer container, and have that ready for you. You can portion it out so you can have it ready for you whenever you need it. Because this is such a intricate, maybe not intricate, but time consuming, you know, thing to make. It's kind of cool to just have it handy whenever you need it without having to go through that whole process over and over again. It'll stay in your fridge for maybe about like maybe 7 days or so. I would say even longer. And this is going to taste so much better tomorrow. Tomorrow is when it's going to really shine. Today it's going to be great. Tomorrow it's going to be like OMG, wow. So as the flavors continue to really meld, it'll be even more delicious. So any questions out there as we wrap up our session today?